Hey, Spencer Sutton here with Evernest, and welcome back to our 8-part video series on the ultimate guide to renting your home. And today we want to talk about the all-important question, how much should I charge for rent? So this is the very first thing you should be doing when you're considering renting your house, is doing the work to figure out, well, exactly how much should I charge in rent? So I'm going to give you some points or some tips on how to do that. And then I'm also going to talk to you about things that you should consider. Now, before we get into that, I do want to say it is very, very easy for us as property managers to look objectively at your property. If this is your house that you're renting, then you're more than likely going to be a little bit more emotionally tied to this property, and you may think it should rent for more than really what the market rate is, and ultimately that's what we want. We're looking for the market rate. The problem becomes if you're over market rate, guess what's going to happen? Your house is going to sit on the market. If there are other homes near you or other homes in the area in the same zip code that are market rent and you're up here, then these houses, these properties are going to get rented first, and yours is going to sit there and be vacant. And so one of the ways that we can tell is if we're not getting any showings or any callings, we know that the rent is too high. What we're asking is too high. And so we work with a lot of owners, a lot of landlords, and this is something that we talk about a lot. We allow them to pick the rental rate. We give them suggestions and help them and say, this is what we believe is market rate. But sometimes they want to go above market rate, and that's okay. We just need to have the understanding that we're going to be reaching out to you if we're not getting any showings on your property. So how should you determine the rent for your house? There's a few ways. Number one, I got my whiteboard here today, so I'm going to write a few things here. Number one, I would say Zillow. Go on Zillow and type in your area, look for properties that are for rent in your area. And you should, so I'm here right now in Homewood, Alabama, and if I go on Zillow, I can type in Homewood, Alabama, or the zip code 35209, and I can see any property that's on Zillow that is for rent. And then that allows me to look at this property and determine, is this house like my house? Is this property like my property? And so the things that I'm looking for are bedrooms, bathrooms, square footage, year built. So these things are very, very important. And then ultimately, I also want to look inside the property. I want to look at the pictures to see if it's updated as mine is or not. So it's going to be very hard if you have a 3-bedroom, 2-bath property to compare it with a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, or a 5-bedroom, 4-bath. That is, much nicer or even much newer. It's going to be hard to find the right rental amount if your house was built in 1930 and has been updated once in the 70s, and you're comparing it versus a new build. Those two things are not going to be equal. So you just have to understand that as close as these things are that you can get together, that's what you want to do. So these are active listings. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that the houses that are listed for rent are also the right rental amount, right? So, but this is a good first step. Second thing is, I would say 2 would be drive the neighborhood. Drive the neighborhood, drive your neighborhood, look for signs in yards, especially if they're property management signs. These property managers probably have extensive experience in your market renting properties, and so I would look and see, hey, are these houses for rent? Maybe you could call about them. Maybe you could look them up online, look them up. They're likely also on Zillow, but you could drive around and see if you see any that are private landlords, and sometimes they don't. If it's in a really hot rental market, they don't even put them on Zillow. They just put a sign in the yard and they typically rent if it's in a very, very hot area. So you could also drive. There's also other ways. One is called RentOMeter. And RentOMeter is a website you can go to, rentometer.com, I believe. You can Google it and find it. and it's going to show you, it's going to base it on comps. So the comps are going to be houses that are currently rented near you. And again, then what you need to do is if they give you a list of properties, they say these 5 properties are within a mile of you, they're all rented, here's the bedrooms, bathrooms, year built, here's how much they're rented for. You need to then look them up on Zillow and just make sure that, hey, these properties are comparables, really good comparables. So these are some ways that you can find out if your property or how much you should rent your property for. Here are some other things that I want you to consider. This is a little bit separate from here, but I'll go ahead and say you need to, we call them white elephants. What is a white elephant? Well, what we used to say is a white elephant is something that you can't ignore, like who's seen a white elephant before, and you can't get rid of. These are properties that have what a friend of ours used to call irreconcilable defects. So these are things that are going to detract from your property. This is also going to play into the price that you ask when you're setting this price. What are those things? I would say they're things like if you live on a very busy street, that is a white elephant. It's going to get, like, people are not going to want to rent as much if you're on a very, very busy street. What's another one? Steep driveways. So we have several markets that in the winter it sometimes snows, and so if you have a very steep driveway up or down, then that is also going to detract or play into the price that you need to be asking. What's some other white elephant issues? I would say if you're very close to power lines. Another thing I would say is if your property has a funky layout. So this is where you need to be objective. Just very objective. Is my house laid out funky or like a weird layout? Maybe it was built, maybe it was like some custom build that somebody did that's not, you don't see it a lot. So there is a reason why these national home builders have certain floor plans that they build all over the country. It's because they sell. The same thing goes for rental properties. As we're seeing more build to rent communities come up, they're very, very specific layouts because these are the layouts that people want. So just be honest with yourself about that. That could be a white elephant that you're likely not going to change before you rent it. All these things, like all the white elephant issues, are going to play into price. Another thing that's going to play into your pricing is your property updated? If you're looking at houses on RentOMeter or Zillow and they're updated modern houses and yours is a little bit, maybe it's hadn't been updated since the 80s or 90s, then more than likely you're going to need to adjust your price down a little bit. So think about that when you're starting to price these properties. Another way that I would say to find out the right rental price is call a property manager. We get these calls all the time. If they have a salesperson, this salesperson is very, very used to helping people determine rental prices. So this is something you can do that would be very helpful to you, is just to get on the phone and say, hey, I'm considering renting out my house. Here's the address. Here's all the information. They'll pull, like here at Evernest, we use something, we don't use RentOMeter. We have a different software that we use. We pull comps, we check them with Zillow. Plus we know because we're in all of these neighborhoods all of the time, all over the country. And so we have a very, very good idea. You can get a lot of great information from a property manager who will shoot you straight on what your property is worth from a rental perspective. And then ultimately the market is going to decide. You want to look for market rate because that is how you're going to rent the property fast, and vacancy will definitely not be your friend when it comes to owning rental property. So you want to rent it fast, you want to rent it to a great resident. But this video was all about how to set your price. And I hope it helps, and we'll see you on part 3 of the ultimate guide to renting your home.